Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan, and thanks for waiting. We are setting up such an exciting uh, joint live stream, and all I can say is I've been looking forward to having Adam James, who is also a PhD and PT. He's got a massive following. He's been talking about Trump's state of mind. He's an expert working with elderly people. And the next MAGA person, and I'm an ex-Mooney person, and we're wounded healers, Adam, and we're wanting to share our expertise with the world. And I just want to say thank you for doing this with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm still just kind of blown away that I'm getting to meet and collaborate with an expert that I'd only heard of from other cult escapees, and from a distance, you've helped me, wrap language around this crazy journey. So I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. It's exciting for me to know that, my family rescued me from the Moonies in '76. I was a total fanatic, and that my work continues to help people leave all types of groups, including the Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and MAGA too. Pam Hemphill credits reading The Cult of Trump, and she refused the pardon that Trump gave to all the J6 criminals. She said, no, I was guilty. I was there and I shouldn't have been, and I don't want the pardon. And Mike Pence wrote her a thank you letter. Thank you for saying, standing up and saying it the right way. And of course,
Wow.
Trump is denying January 6th attack was a violent coup attempt to subvert democracy, but that's exactly what it was. And Jack Smith said so in his research, and he felt like he had all the evidence he needed to criminally convict Trump.
That's right.
Adam, tell us more about your background for my folks, please. Just give us a little upbringing, your upbringing, and frame your expertise, and then let's get into it.
Yeah. So I'm a licensed physical therapist in the state of Georgia. I have been for the last 15 years total, last 14 years working in home health care, treating geriatric patients with a lot of chronic illnesses, congestive heart failure, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, hypertension, and a lot of dementia, all types of different dementia, in addition to just age-related cognitive decline. And I was also born into fundamentalist evangelical cult groups, church cult groups that I escaped. I became a leader inside that group. I was a pastor. I helped start a church that's still going today. And I hit a tipping point in 2017 and left all that behind and have been untangling ever since.
I didn't realize you were a pastor too. That's impressive.
Oh, yes.
Do you happen to know Andre Gagne by any chance? He was a pastor of an NAR group and became a Bible scholar, and that made him leave because he studied the Bible. And
That's right. I am quite familiar with Andre. I've listened to many podcasts, read some of his stuff, and the NAR hates to see him coming because he critically interrogates everything that they believe. And that's the one thing they don't want you to do.
Yeah, because the believers think they're following the Bible, and then they listen to someone who actually knows Scripture and but also have had the lived experience. So it's a very powerful combo.
That's right. He provokes people to move beyond Christian apologetics, which is basically the most common form of biblical understanding you find among American Christians. They are purposefully sequestered from anything resembling critical scholarship of the Bible, because if they ever get exposed to that, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, and I'll just mention I know Harvey Cox. He's a former Baptist minister, professor at Harvard Divinity School.
Hmm.
Married a Jewess, agreed to raise their child as a Jew, and that's how I met him at my temple in Brookline, Massachusetts. And he wrote a scholarly book for Christians called Common Prayers. And he said, Christians, you should know about Judaism because Jesus, all of his teachings should be understood in the frame of what Judaism teaches. And I learned a lot from reading his book, even though it was intended for Christians.
Hmm. Yeah, the more you dig into the historical context of what Jesus was saying publicly, um, just language he uses, like "take my yoke because my burden is my burden is easy, my yoke is easy, my burden is light." I think is how the text goes. That is extremely Jewish language. That is ancient Orthodox Jewish language. That you would take the yoke of a rabbi upon you. You would take his teaching upon you. It was actually a common expression. So yeah, the people who know that world, I think they have a much richer understanding of Jesus of Nazareth than typical American evangelicals.
Yep. And Adam, I haven't dug into it, but I heard that Trump was at the National Prayer Breakfast of the cult that I mentioned in the cult of Trump, the family. What
Yeah.
did you hear about what he said and what was going on there? Could you share that with the audience, please?
Um,
Because
even
you're an expert on
Eric Metaxas,
dementia, so this is
right?
relevant.
Right. So there doesn't appear in that speech, there does not appear to be any effort at maintaining any sort of Christian appearance, which is hysterical. Um, his filter is failing him. The frontotemporal dementia that I suspect he has, his frontal lobe's ability to reality test and decide whether or not to say this thing or not, it's failing him, even to the point that one of the hardest MAGA supporters you're ever going to find anywhere, Eric Metaxas, he tweeted, he said, "This is really bad," which was shocking to me. That let me know, okay, it's really bad.
Yeah, so let's get into it. For you, because that's not my specialty, is the elderly and understanding stuff. Educate my network. I know your network has been listening to and following you. My assistant Jim has been following you. He loves you, and I've been following you too, but not as religiously, if I can use that term.
Sure. Sure. We have to be careful how we use that expression, don't we? But yeah, I'm pretty sure that the president has what's known as frontotemporal dementia. It's different from like classical Alzheimer's because it doesn't simply involve forgetting. Alzheimer's is just holes in the memory that over time get worse and worse. Um, Frontotemporal dementia involves what's called confabulation, which is where you fill in the holes in your memory with lies that you 100% believe yourself. So there is clinical basis to say that the president could literally be committed to, let's say, just for example, the Stop the Steal, the 2020 election fraud. That could literally be something he believes because he has dementia, not necessarily because he's just committed to his own cause. Now, I have to caution people that the context of all of his frontotemporal dementia symptoms are malignant narcissism. He is one of
Right.
the worst people in public life that society has ever produced. And if you have any doubt about that, you've been living under a rock. So uh, so yeah, I believe he has the frontotemporal dementia. He has the characteristic forward-leaning posture that is a dead ringer for frontotemporal dementia. The wide-based gait, the wide swinging of the right leg at times, in a kind of a semicircular fashion because of weakness on that side of his body. I believe he's also had some sort of stroke-like event, most likely this past Labor Day, where he randomly disappeared for 2 or 3 days. If he shows signs of a stroke event, he is in a situation as the president where he can receive the clot-busting drugs immediately. As soon as symptoms show up, he can receive the TPA through an IV, and it can prevent the stroke from becoming extremely severe, much more severe for a typical person who would be 20 or 30 minutes from the emergency room. Phonemic
Adam, by
paraphasias
the way,
is
are
another
you
symptom.
able to see the comments that Cammie's putting up? People are giving, donations. Are you able to see that on your end? And
Yeah,
and
I saw
and
one pop
somebody
up just
just said
now.
that somebody said that he shits in his Depends, in his diapers.
That's right.
And that's something I've been hearing from people who are in their apprentice, who had to help him clean up because he lost his ability to hold it, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep, they put
And
that
that
up
can
again.
definitely be a
Go ahead.
symptom of dementia as well. You
Mhm.
lose as soon as I find out that a patient is incontinent, my next question is, are we dealing with functional incontinence, which is where you simply cannot reach a toilet fast enough, or are you simply losing control, like a pelvic floor issue, either as a result of an injury or aging, or are you simply not aware that you must empty your bowel or empty your bladder? And we see this a lot with dementia patients. They lose safety awareness. They lose a sense of you know what is safe to do, what is not safe to do. So it could simply be the effect of dementia, but there is also, there's some testimony floating around right now that hasn't been fully substantiated yet, that he may have suffered some sort of severe injury uh, to his colon that has caused this since the 90s. But yeah, it's one or
Interesting.
the other. Yeah.
So I just want to circle back to your comment about malignant narcissism, because that was a term created by the social psychologist Erich Fromm when he was analyzing Adolf Hitler. And I learned
Mm.
about it decades ago, and I started applying it to every cult leader that I've come across, because it's so stereotypically the profile of the people who want to need narcissistic supply, have no empathy. Everything's transactional. They need admiration. They feel entitled to everything. They have no empathy, and they think they're above the law, pathological lying, sadistic, paranoid, can't trust, want revenge. And we know from being around a person with this personality disorder, they get rid of anyone who says, you shouldn't have said that, or you did bad, or you just lied. He gets rid of anybody that isn't framing everything in a way that lifts up and gives him this narcissistic supply. And I interviewed a famous psychologist, neuroscientist, who was teaching a course on narcissism, pathological narcissism. His name is Frank George, and has studied at NIH addiction, and he said from his perspective, it's the same brain pathways for a narcissist needing a narcissistic supply for someone who
Wow.
needs dopamine supply or any other type of drug addiction. And it made perfect sense to me, but it was nice to hear from an expert.
Absolutely. And for anybody who hasn't heard of Dr. Frank George, you really should go follow him on Substack. He is on point with all of his clinical observation of Trump. Yeah, it makes you worried about anybody who becomes really good friends with Donald Trump. Like, how did you do that? He attracts the same kind of people that he is.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just add, I have my podcast, which is Cults, Culture, and Coercion, and I interviewed Frank George for it. And we're
Ah,
talking about doing a live stream too. But if people are interested in hearing me interacting with him, it's always a different interview based on the expertise of the person that's being interviewed, but also my framing of it. but I think he's great.
Yeah.
He's really great. Yeah, so he's very dangerous because and Bandy Lee, who edited the New York Times best-selling volume, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, that came out during this first term with 27 psychiatrists who were all weighing in, including my mentor, Robert J. Lifton, whose book about Chinese communist brainwashing helped get me out of the Moonies. He's since written a number of books on Nazi doctors, etc. He wrote a book called Losing Reality before he passed away that people may want to pay attention to. And another mentor who contributed to that volume was Philip Zimbardo of Stanford, who taught a course called The Psychology of Mind Control for 15 years there. And whatever the right word is, he used 2 chapters of my first book, Combating Cult Mind Control. And he really helped support me and encourage me, because when people look at people like coming out of the Moonies, what was wrong with Steve? He must have been stupid. He must have been, gullible. He must have been traumatized as a child. And I was none of those things. I just got deceived and brainwashed.
Yeah.
And I really want your followers to understand, we've studied this. Like, this is a thing that we can now identify. And that's partly why I did my doctoral dissertation on my bite model of authoritarian control, because the law needs to get updated. The law currently says if you're a minor, you can be unduly influenced. If you're elderly with dementia, you can be unduly influenced. And as someone who was 19 and an extra honor student, I was unduly influenced. So we need to have a framework that can fit either a one-on-one controlling relationship all the way to China that has over 1 billion people in it. But if you can control behavior, information, thoughts, and emotions, and make people dependent and make people admire the leader to think like him and walk like him and talk like him, etc. That's and what's happening now in the United States is we're all getting brainwashed through the media, through constant lies, repetition, overload of information. And healthy, normal people, unless you learn to regulate your own intake and meta comments when you know that something is a lie, that he's projecting his own dastardly deeds on everybody else, people should be meta commenting to themselves, that's a lie, or that's the pattern of cult leaders. Stereotypical. Because otherwise the brain, if the brain keeps hearing a lie over and over and over again, the brain starts acting like it's the truth. We know that from
That's right.
neuroscience.
Yeah, I love that
But we
term you just
can't.
used, meta comment. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah, comment to yourself about what you're thinking, and that's why it's so crucial, I feel, for people to have an explanatory framework to understand what's currently happening in our country and around our world, and understand the different bad actors, including Russia, China, the billionaire techies who want to have control of the world for themselves, who have their own wacko ideology of transhumanism and long-termism and accelerationism and crypto. By the way, crypto's going down. It was always a scam to me. I've been talking about it being a pyramid scheme since I first heard about it. I'm like, what's the product? You're just recruiting other people to believe in it. And if you get enough people to believe in it, you make a lot of money. And then you get out, you invest it in real assets, and everyone else is left losing a ton of money.
Yep.
And I'm afraid that's what's going to happen.
I was shocked to see Peter Thiel co-opting the Antichrist, the eschatology from the Book of Revelation. I thought, well, this little you know what he is trying to co-opt the God card, which is what the evangelicals have been using for, 300 years to achieve their own rhetorical goals and power structure and identity politics. And here he is seeing how powerful it is when you mix God in with your ideology. And then it gets supercharged because now God is on board with whatever it is you think. I thought that was a
Yep.
blatant mind control technique.
Yep, it really is. For me, I kind of look at the last 50 years, 70 years. In my book, Cult of Trump, I went back to Bernays' book in 1928, Propaganda. But we know for a fact, and I was in the frickin' room with Sun Myung Moon in 1974 when he talked about infiltrating the government, how God doesn't like democracy, it's satanic. God wants a theocracy to rule the world. Like, I was believing this crap in 1974. And people like Ann Nelson wrote Shadow Network about this private billionaire right-wing group called the Council for National Policy, who has been plotting the overthrow of the United States democratic system because they don't want regulations. They want a politic, from the pulpit. They want dark money so that no one can track foreign governments, bad actors. It's been very systematic. And if we're going to pull ourselves out of this assault, this World War III of psychological warfare, people have to get educated and educate their family and their friends. It's not going to be being on Instagram as much as we like to message people through this thing. This is Zuckerberg's channel, right? And we could get shut off at any moment, or YouTube could get shut off at any moment. People are going to need to start really doing their homework in real time.
We have to recover our ability to critically think. It sounds like a broken record sometimes with the way we talk about critical thinking, but it's, we've experienced decades and decades of successful attack on public education all by itself. I just made a video yesterday about, I'm telling the story about how I escaped MAGA one part at a time, and I have just now started to talk about the racist component of being part of fundamentalist evangelicalism. Like, when the public school system was integrated, all the white Christians just pivoted and started their own schools. They just started their own private Christian schools.
Including Falwell, right? Because I just interviewed a scholar who wrote a book on Falwell.
Yeah. And all those schools, I happen to. Oh, I see. But I graduated from one of these schools. My senior year of high school was this very, high quality college prep school. During class one day, my AP government and economics teacher got an email from a former student that she'd just gotten into Harvard Law. Like, it was, a legit prep school. But the vast majority of these de facto segregation schools, their education is subpar. They don't exist to create academic excellence. They exist to propagate their power structure.
And when I was a Moonie, I was taught by Sun Myung Moon, and I've since, over the decades, learned this is very popular amongst Christian right-wing cults, the Ham teaching, that black people are the descendants of Ham.
Oh my God. That was part of the Mooney ideology? I didn't know that. Incredible.
Yeah, I heard Moon through his own mouth talk about how black people are blessed because you can look at basketball and football and see how many black people are there, but Koreans are blessed spiritually. And it's like, and to tie it back to Trump, I heard from Aaron Parnas this morning that apparently Trump put out Michelle and Barack Obama's image
Oh
on
god,
top of gorilla bodies, like,
man,
uh,
it's grotesque.
unfrickin' believable.
It is
It's
unbelievable.
really
Yeah,
it's
until,
shocking.
I have to remind myself he has dementia. That's why he did that. Yeah.
Yeah, but we also have to know the people who are paying money and backing him and such are racist,
Oh. Oh, of
and
course. They
if
eat
they
it up. They love
weren't,
it. They're
they would leave in a minute. They would speak out critically about this
correct.
if
He
they
knows
really
that his
were not.
support base is in favor of him posting something like that.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and so let's chat for a few minutes about people who are maybe having doubts now about, and they're willing to listen to me and you. Like, let's talk about what we can say to them. I mean, what I want to say to them is welcome. Like I've been
Yeah.
criticizing families and people who've cut off their uncles, their fathers, their mothers, their aunts, uncles, even children because they got into MAGA. And I've been saying keep contact. Even avoid talking about politics, but keep them in your life because I know people have doubts, even if they're brainwashed. Their real self is still in there. And I want
Yeah.
millions of people to leave MAGA,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I want to
And
welcome
there
them, and I want them to pressure the
yes.
GOP.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry, Adam.
And
Go
it
for it, buddy.
takes it takes, the approach you're talking about is the high road. And to be quite honest, uh, one of the main reasons I haven't gone no contact with family is because of what I learned from you about the authentic self and the cult self. And
Mm,
you'd be so proud of me. I haven't had a chance to tell you this yet, but I had a conversation with my parents where I told them directly, um, I'm really worried for both of you because I feel like you both have been taken captive by propaganda. I was just
mm,
very honest. And I chose a story about both of them that I remember from them from when I was a child that displays their authentic self. So I reminded both of them of those stories, and they were stories where my mother reaching out to help a child at the school she was teaching at, where um, she reached out to help this child because her behavior problems were so disruptive, and she was successful. And this child was a poor black child that apparently had never had any, you know, she just needed somebody to show that they cared about her. A similar story from my
mm.
dad. I reminded them both of these stories, and I say, "That right there is who you both really are, and I know that."
Yeah, and you're calling up not just memories of who they were before they even knew Trump existed, but you're encouraging values, like center yourself on love and compassion. And that's one of the other things about MAGA. Unlike legitimate Christianity that teaches love and forgive your
Yeah.
enemies, they're like kill your enemies, let's put them in jails. Let's
Yeah.
destroy the enemies because we have the enemy within, and it's like the opposite of values of
Uh-huh.
legitimate religion that's about God and love and truth.
It was like watching a TV show when Trump said at Charlie Kirk's funeral, when he said, "Oh, that's the difference between me and Charlie. I hate my enemies." I was like, "What are you doing? This is a funeral. Are you out of your mind?" Like, can you at
But
least
but
play the part for 30 minutes?
so Edmund Burke said power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you're the president and you're the most powerful person in the world and you surround yourself with yes people, yeah, you think you could say anything.
What's so crazy about what you just said is that one of the de facto segregation schools, Burke County is just to the south of me. and they have a de facto segregation school called Edmund Burke Academy.
Interesting. Need to do a
Yeah.
deeper dive and learn about that. That's fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is also just to join your parents where you do agree on things, and
Yeah.
ask them open-ended questions. Like, I'm curious, like, how are you doing health-wise? And, if you get ill, are you gonna be able to afford your health care? Because they know you're a
Yeah.
healthcare expert, right? And we know that everybody's healthcare is going up through the roof, at least I think
Yeah.
the GOP is trying to extend some of the Obamacare benefits. I'm not up on the
Yeah.
latest.
Yeah, I think I can't remember if that vote actually was successful or not, to bring it back to the floor, but
Yeah,
I evoked those 2 stories from them, and then I put it into a question. If you were to recount these stories about your authentic self for Donald Trump himself, let's say you had a chance to talk to him. If you were to tell him these stories, do you think he would understand why these stories are powerful? And they both said, yeah. It's like, all right, that's enough.
that's interesting. That's interesting. Really? Tell me more is what I would say. Tell me what he
Ah,
would have said.
yeah.
And I got surprised a few weeks ago. The editor of the Daily Beast interviewed me for their podcast. I got surprised
Yeah.
because at the end, the editor said, "So if you're in the White House with Donald Trump, Steve, what would you say to him?" And nobody's ever run that scenario by me before. And I was like, hmm. And I thought for a minute and I said, the only way I would ever be in the White House with Donald Trump would be for him to try to like buy me off or threaten me to like, recount recant rather my book and all of my work
Yes.
on brainwashing. And I leaned forward in the interview and I'd say, fuck you. No way am I recanting anything. I've never held my finger up before in a major interview, but if I really was in front of him, and I say this on a very deep personal way, Adam, I didn't say this at the beginning, but I literally grew up in Flushing, Queens, New York, 1.3 miles from his childhood home. I grew up
Yes.
as a New Yorker knowing all the stories of how he took advantage of contractors, wouldn't pay them, abused
Yeah.
women. Like, I've known this
Mhm.
my whole life. So when my book agent asked me to write The Cult of Trump, I'm like, I don't do political books. But he's like, yeah, but who else could do it than you?
Oh,
Like, this
yeah.
guy. And all I knew, and I said yes, was he was a malignant narcissist. I didn't realize there were actual authoritarian cults that comprise his base. And that's chapter
Oh, that's
7 and 8
interesting.
of The Cult of Trump.
Yes. Yep, I remember that.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the only way they could amass political power the way that they have. And those people are, these Christians are, and I can tell you, I can say this because I was one. They have been
Yep.
groomed with authoritarian control for decades already. So all Trump has to do is, if you're Chris LaCivita or Susie Wiles, all you got to do is figure out how do we tap in to that resource. We'll do whatever we got to do. We'll play whatever part we have to play. He'll say 2 Corinthians from the stage and all that foolishness, but that's what they wanted.
Instead of, yeah, right. I want to say that, for people who know my work, and if some of your followers are new to me, check out my influence continuum graphic on freedomofmind.com and
Yes.
and understand there's legitimate influence that's ethical with informed consent, respect for conscience and individuality, and the authoritarian mind control and stuff. But what we now know is healthy parenting is developmentally appropriate, and healthy parents want to raise children to grow up to be themselves and believe what they want to believe. But authoritarians, this is why I'm getting to my point, actually. People who are raised, trained to be obedient, that was the phrase that set me off on this tangent. Hopefully it's interesting, is corporal punishment. On the authoritarian side, you get spanked, paddled, belted. Monty Mader, I'm a fan of her work. She was raised in an
Yes.
extremist group on a cattle ranch. Her father used the whip on her one time. And so you're conditioning children to be obedient out of fear.
Yeah.
And you're programming them with the T of the bite model to have a black and white, simplistic, all or nothing, good versus evil, us versus them ideology. So the
Yeah.
nuances and learning new perspectives is not part of the human experience, where you look forward to changing your mind, being exposed to new cultures, new beliefs, new philosophies, etc. When you're in one of these things, they want you to be a clone of what the parents believe and what their church is teaching.
That's right. Because that's how they're programmed this way, because this is how the movement galvanizes and expands. That's really what it comes down to. And what's funny is core doctrines inside evangelicalism have been negotiated to accommodate authoritarian control. And one of the main ones is known as the penal substitutionary atonement theory, which is the idea that Jesus was punished on the cross in my place. So somebody was going to catch it from the Heavenly Father, because sin has to be punished. And so instead of God crucifying, flogging and torturing and running a spear through our side, he does it to Jesus instead. And that's the good news. So they think, and the truth is, in first century Christianity, penal substitutionary atonement did not exist. No first century Christians thought of the cross as, oh, he took my place. And when Paul writes about the Passover lamb, that's the language he uses to describe the crucifixion. But you fast forward 2,000 years, and now we have a theology that's been negotiated to accommodate authoritarian control. Punishment is now central to it. Yeah, even though the scripture says there's no fear in love, because perfect love casts out all fear, and fear has to do with punishment. The Apostle John is literally trying to teach Christians this has nothing to do with punishment, because in the new covenant, sin is forgiven. It's not punished. But again, the rhetorical goals of the American evangelical church are control, authoritarian control. So you got to have them be afraid of something, which is why people are in an uproar at Kirk Cameron for saying he doesn't believe in eternal conscious torment anymore, for anybody who's following that situation.
Yeah, thank you. You're teaching me. I love this. I really appreciate you sharing that. It's a journey, isn't it? Like, nobody knows the truth with a capital T, but there are a lot of people running around saying, I know the truth, and I talked to God, and God told me Trump won the election in 2020. And if you don't agree with me, you have a demon, and I need to do an exorcism on you. And that's what a lot of these new apostolic reformation groups are doing. They're making people believe that their actual doubts are evil demons.
Correct. You have enough of a grasp to where you could start an NAR church right now. I guarantee it.
So people have said that to me for, it's almost 50 years. May 11th will be my 50th anniversary of my waking up moment.
Oh, wow.
People have been saying that to me. Steve, you know enough. You could start your own cult. and they think it's funny. And I say, it's like saying to a rape victim, you know how to rape people now.
Oh,
Why don't you go rape a few people? That's
yeah,
how it hits me. It's like I
of
felt
course.
like I had been spiritually raped when I
That's right.
realized what the Moonies had
And I
done to
only
my mind.
Yeah, I only laugh out of the absurdity, but the psychological reality, I experienced it myself. I mean, it's it untangling all this, you know, I had to tear my own identity down to the studs. And if you do that, especially if you're 32 years old like I was, it will, like, for me, it threw me into, basically what was clinical depression and anxiety because I don't know
Mhm.
who or what I am. So it's it's not for the faint of heart.
Well, it happened to me when I was only in 2.5 years before I nearly died in a van crash due to sleep deprivation and wound up in the hospital. And my story's in chapter 2 of Combating, and I put it on Freedom of Mind for free if people want to hear my story. But
Yeah.
I didn't want to leave. I had no conscious doubts, but I wanted to prove to my family I wasn't in a cult and I wasn't brainwashed. I was that much of a true believer. So when they said, just listen to these ex-members with an open mind and for 5 days, and if you want to go back, at least, my father said, at least your mother and I will be able to sleep at night, knowing we did the responsible thing to expose you to
Wow.
this information. And so
Huh.
I was all into, I was so certain because I knew God and I know the divine principle. That's what the Moonies call their Bible, which they
Yeah.
claim is the completed testament, not the Old or New Testament, but the completed testament, because it's all about
Ooh.
moon. And by the way, there's a new documentary I watched called The Moonies Married to the Cult, and Moon does these mass weddings. If I don't know if your
Mhm.
followers are too young to know about, like, he used to say you and you, you and you, and he would do mass weddings up to 35,000 couples, like 70,000 people at one time. And
Right.
in this documentary, it features Moon's illegitimate son that he had outside of his perfect sinless marriage. And
Uh-oh.
we found out that he was purifying all those vaginas, but his teachings were that was all fake news. When I was a leader in the Moonies, that was Satan trying to, tempt us to leave, but it actually turned
Yep.
out to be true. And the actual
Mhm.
son, who was raised by his interpreter, Bo Pak, was featured in this. And
Wow.
whoa. Yeah, it's really worth and this is another point I wanna make for listeners, and that is what you don't wanna do ever is attack the leader, the doctrine, or the policy head on with logic and facts, because that amplifies the cult identity to feel persecuted and victimized, right? You wanna
Uh-huh.
talk about other groups and ask questions. You want to teach them about brainwashing. Like with MAGA, I like to talk about Chinese communist brainwashing and pimps and traffickers and how they do it using the bite model. And then
Yeah.
ask people to go back in time to their first memory of Donald Trump. And did they like him? Their first memory? Almost nobody did. Or maybe they saw him on The Apprentice, but they thought he was a
Uh-huh.
blowhard. That's what people would say to me. My first memory was from The Apprentice or whatever. That's another point I want to make, which is Mark Burnett, who did The Apprentice, is head of this one of the seven mountains of dominionism of media. And this is the
Ah,
same guy who
yes.
does Shark Tank and Survivor,
Uh-huh.
but
That's
he's
right.
married to a woman, and they believe in Christian nationalism. They want
Uh-huh.
a Christian country, but
She
he
was
was
the star of
groomed.
Touched by an Angel for years.
Yeah. So,
Hmm.
again, they were building a phony image that he was a successful business person when the guy was a failure of one thing after another after another. Got bailed
Yeah.
out by his father, got bailed out by Russian mafia, over and over and over again. But the point I'm trying to get though to is empowering people to think for themselves by asking them warm
Yeah.
questions, but after you have a conversation. And I'll often meet somebody and I'll say, I'm curious, have you ever seen a documentary about cults? And people will say, oh, I saw a thing on Scientology, or I saw a thing on Nexium, or I saw a thing on this group, or Jim Jones and People's Temple. That was the suicide, not the suicide, the genocidal flavor aid cyanide cult in
Hmm.
1978. But if they've seen it, I want to connect the dots in their mind to this phenomenon, because
Yeah.
if you're a fanatic in any group and you look at the dead bodies from that were face down on the jungle floor and you ask
Hmm.
them the hypothetical question, I'm curious, is there anything your pastor could ask you to do that you'd say no to? And they're like, "No, there's nothing." So, did you ever see the Jim Jones story? If he
Oh,
asked you to
absolutely.
line up and pour cyanide-laced Flavor Aid in your kid's mouth, would you do
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
Oh, he would never, my pastor would never ask me. But then I say, "That's not my question. If he asked you,
Right.
would you do it?" Because if they start thinking about that and go, "No, I wouldn't kill my kid." And I've had this with ex-JWs where their
Yeah.
kid's dying, needs a blood transfusion. The group is saying, "You can't give a
Uh,
blood transfusion." A 27-year-old was giving birth. She needed a blood transfusion. She said, "No, the kid has no mother." She died. Right? So, but then
yeah.
I meet people who then leave the witnesses and they feel guilty because they let their own flesh and blood die for no reason other than what the dogma of the
That's
watchtower.
right. Yeah. That kind of grief requires professional help. I mean, just that would tear my soul in half.
Yeah, and a lot of people leave cults when they start to have kids and they start realizing, I don't want to raise my kid the way I was raised. I
That's
don't want
right.
to corporally punish my kid, or I don't want to teach my kid
Mhm.
to hate because it
Yeah. That was
sucks.
that's right. That was part of that was one of the factors that led to my tipping point was I had a 2-year-old daughter. And you know, in the nursery of the church, we knew there were kids in that nursery who had not been vaccinated because fundamentalist evangelical Christianity is like full of anti-vaxxers and health
Right.
nuts who base all of their, you know, all of their they peddle the worst health advice. They join pyramid schemes. They, are drink raw milk and they're huge fans of RFK Jr. and all of this insanity. Um, then on top of that, our pastor's wife was really trying to manipulate my wife into bringing our, newborn daughter into the children's nursery. And it was like my wife, who did not grow up like I did at all, her impression was, I will bring her in there when I am ready. Like, I'm not asking for, like, I haven't invited you into this part of my life. I'm not asking you about this. But she felt
Mhm.
100% emboldened to insert herself into that part of our lives. And why would she do
Yep.
that? Because it's a cult. She thinks there are no boundaries in a cult.
Yeah. And men are supposed to make all the decisions, and if your wife didn't grow up in a cult, she'd be like, "No, I don't sign on to that. I love Adam, but I'm not gonna do whatever he tells me just because he's the man."
Yeah, and to be honest, again, my wife is I probably mentioned before, my wife is level 1 autistic and inattentive ADHD. She was diagnosed in her late 30s. She didn't vibe like, she had a genuine spiritual experience, but, like, everything else about fundamentalist evangelical culture, she could throw in the lake. She didn't care for any of that stuff,
Uh-huh.
and that's why it was so much easier to leave because of who I was married to.
That's
I could
another
never have
pattern.
envisioned. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
imagine yourself, like, you have that wreck in the van, and then your waking up happens, but you're single. You don't have any children. Like, you can kinda come and go, and it's just you that you're responsible for it, but for me, I I don't know how I ended up as fortunate as I have been with my wife, like, who she is, what she values, because she was exactly the person I needed as I tore my identity down and rebuilt it from scratch. She was there right beside me like, "Yep, I'm with you. Sounds good."
And she loved you for you and not an ideology, or she wasn't, ordered to marry you. A lot of the people I work
No,
with were arranged in marriages and stuff.
that's right, that's right.
Love is stronger than mind control. That's what I keep telling people. I
Oh,
really believe it.
oh, that's powerful. I'd never thought about that. Wow.
Because, on the healthy side of the influence continuum, love is unconditional. I love you for your beingness. But on the unhealthy side of the continuum, we love you if you do what we tell you to do. If you
Oh my
believe what we
god.
believe, etc.
Yeah,
It's conditional love based on
yeah.
performance, obedience, surrender of your free will. And here's
That
another
hits
one I'd
really
like
deep.
to share. Here's another one I'd like to share with you. By the way, we started 10 minutes late, so we agreed to do an hour. So for my listeners who are wondering, how long is this going to go on? We're going to go to 4:40 Eastern. So what I've learned in working with people in Jewish cults, Christian cults, and Muslim cults, um, I say when I'm doing a case, I say, the three great religions, no matter how you want to understand the Garden of Eden story, if you believe Almighty God created Adam and Eve and didn't brainwash them to be obedient, that says something about the divine plan, because
Yeah.
thousands of years later, groups say God wants you to be obedient, doesn't want you to make your own choices. That's going against the divine original plan
Oh,
of wanting
wow.
children to grow up and be reflections of God, have that
Yeah.
divinity piece. At least that's
Mhm.
one of the things that I like to bring up.
That's beautiful. There's a theologian named Brad Jersak, who he actually did his master's thesis on the penal substitutional atonement theory that I mentioned earlier. Then he did his PhD. It was kind of a study abroad situation where he linked up with a mentor who was uh, a he was clergy in the Greek Orthodox Church. So he actually traveled to I think he was in the Middle East, maybe Eastern Europe, and
Mhm.
he was processing, you know, atonement theory and the love of God and blah blah blah. And finally, he called him Father Lazar. He stopped Brad and he was like, "You don't worship Yahweh, you worship Molech because you need child sacrifice to appease your God."
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, people forget
changed his life.
Jews used to have a temple and they used to like kill animals. Like that was the religion. People don't understand Judaism has evolved, and
Right.
Judaism does not worship Moses as
Mm-mm.
much as he's considered the greatest prophet. It's
Yeah,
idolatry to worship an individual human being.
sure.
And there's rabbinic interpretation, and the original stuff, women didn't weren't rabbis, and even to this day, the religious extremists in Israel, like my rabbi of my Brookline temple is a conservative trained orthoprax, rabbi, but they don't accept her as a legitimate rabbi because she's female.
Right.
And she's like, she's orthoprax. She doesn't drive on Shabbat, she doesn't eat
Ah,
shellfish and pork, and, I mean, she really tries, if I think she does, like, really is orthoprax.
yeah.
But she's not Jewish enough for the extremists who say, only men can be rabbis.
Sure. It's just the way that she lovingly interacts and treats everyone else in the world that, you know, apparently that's not good enough.
Yeah, and we believe, gays are divine and are creatures of
Mhm,
God, and we
mhm.
we 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 have a wide tent, and that's another thing. The Abrahamic religions were like, be nice to the immigrants and the strangers in the
Oh,
desert. If you feed and you give water to anybody who shows up, because if you do it for them, you may need it one day. And like that's how
yes.
the human species has succeeded so well, is because we trust and we rely on each other to help each other out when we need help. And that's the
Mhm.
complete opposite of this elitist, group in power right now in the US.
Yeah, it's shameful. I saw the footage recently of an ICE agent who is a Latin man with a very significant accent trying to detain another Latin man who also has a very significant accent. And he's saying to him, "Oh, you got an accent. We're going to bring you in." And the man on the street says, "You got an accent too?"
That's so interesting, and, Bad Bunny is performing for the Super Bowl, which
Oh,
is happening in a few
yes.
days. It's Puerto Rican,
Ah,
Spanish, the first Spanish, album to win and everything, and I hear the MAGAs are gonna have an alternate Super Bowl halftime show because they don't want
yes.
people exposed to, Latino music,
Right. We'd
right?
rather
It's
expose them to Kid Rock's lyrics about pedophilia. It's much more Christian.
Yeah, let's not forget to mention Epstein files, Epstein
Oh,
files,
I'm telling
and
you.
the facts of the actual emails from Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, and all of these people who are in this vast, I'll say, conspiracy. It's not a theory, it's a
Yeah.
conspiracy that says
Mhm.
it's okay if you're wealthy and powerful to abuse girls and women and lie
That's right.
about it.
Yeah.
It's
There's
not
this
okay.
no, it's unconscionable. Um, and there's this, kind of covert, effort in some states that I've seen it in Utah where they are trying to change the age of consent. And it's almost like the grassroots, effort to make Epstein okay. Because there are so many of them involved in it, they might as well just try to upend society, so there's no longer a crime, I suppose.
Well, you're hitting on another important point of these big cults like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, where they always wanted to protect the reputation of the cult and wouldn't
Mhm,
report pedophiles to police or even discipline pedophiles,
mhm,
and blame the victims. You were too cute as that 7-year-old. Like I couldn't help myself because you
uh,
seduced me. It's like, duh. Talk
mm,
talk about reversal of
yeah,
anything moral, right?
yeah, yeah,
So,
it's revolting.
we could talk for hours, dude. I'm so excited to do this. Let's do it again soon. We're
Sure.
wrapping up, but I wanna give you last words. I'm really appreciating this.
Oh, man. Well, I comment on the health of the president and other elected officials on a consistent basis, that's how most people have found me. But I'm also a survivor of, being born into a, authoritarian fundamentalist evangelical cult groups, and the post-Trump world is actually what I'm more interested in, and we have to recover our ability to critically interrogate the things we think and believe, because there are nefarious forces in the world that would subjugate us simply because their evil cannot be satisfied. We are seeing those
Hmm.
people in the most powerful positions on the planet. It's like James Tallarico says, it's not that we can't feed the poor, it's that we can't satisfy billionaires. They have an insatiable evil about them. And
Malignant narcissists.
there it is.
All of
It's
them.
like a tumor, like a malignant tumor. But I want to remind everybody that, like Samwise Gamgee said, there is some good in the world and it's worth fighting for.
Yeah, and there's more of us than them, and we have a lot of people with incredible smarts and talents and abilities. We just need to strategize and organize together. I definitely want to thank people who are going out on the streets in freezing cold weather to protest. It does make a difference, and it
Yes.
makes a difference to people in the world to see that the whole United States is not submitting to this nonsense, this evil.
No,
We want
no.
people to realize it's the Trump administration and all of these people that are supporting the oil companies and the the abuse stuff. But most Americans are good people, and
Yeah.
our strength as a country is that we're a country of immigrants. And shout out to the indigenous people who are the real owners of America. We're all immigrants on their land on a certain level.
Oh, did I lose you?
So I think we're wrapping up. It looks frozen on my end, but I want to thank my team, Jerry, Cami, and everybody else. And come check out my
I think I might have dropped the
Substack, my
connection. I'm
YouTube
sorry.
channel, Dr. Stephen Hassan. Check out Adam James, Epistemic Crisis. And thank you.